Scott Weaver with Designer's Workroom. So today we're going to go over how to make a pinch pleated drapery. And to start with, we're going to figure out how much fabric we need. Now I've got my rod here, and I'm not going by my window width, I'm going by my rod width. And if you don't understand how to do that, go onto my my site, my YouTube site, and look at all my videos, because I do have how to pinch pleat draperies for beginners, and there's several volumes. Volume 1 starts with the how to measure your window. Volume 2 is different scenarios on how to figure out how to calculate your fabric, amount of fabric, how many widths you need, and etc. But in this video, the purpose of this video is to make a drapery, a pair of draperies, and a valance, a matching valance. And I'm going to walk you straight through the whole steps involved on doing it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the rod. I'm using a standard traverse rod that looks like this. Okay. Our width of our rod is going to be 54 inches. So the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out how much fabric do we need to cover a 54-inch rod. Now, a lot of people believe that if you've got a 54-inch rod and your fabric is 54 inches wide, that you can put a width on one side and a width onto the other end, making a pair of draperies, and that's full enough. But in my calculation, it really isn't. I prefer it to be fuller. So as I've explained in my previous videos, I like to use 2.5 times my rod width. So what that means is my fabric is 54 inches wide. So if my rod is 54 and I go times, I'm sorry, yes, my rod is 54, times 2.5, I need a whole 135 inches. I'm not dealing with centimeters. I apologize for the people who are watching, but I'm going in inches because that's how I kind of grew up. But of course there are apps to figure out inches to centimeters. So anyway, comes out to 135 inches. Now I'm going to take that 135, I'm going to divide it by the width of my material. My material here is 54 inches, so I'm going to divide that by 54. I come out with 2.5 widths of material. So technically what that would mean is I need a full width of material, and then to add a quarter width to make 1/2 panel, and then a full width and another quarter width to make the other panel, so you have a left and a right. However, in pinch pleating, sometimes it gets difficult when you're only adding a quarter of a width. I like to round up to a 1/2 width or round down. In this case, I don't want to use just 2 widths of material to make a pair, 1 width and 1 width. And so I'm going to round up to 3 widths of fabric. So what that means is I'm going to cut 3 cuts of material, and then I'm going to take one of those cuts and I'm going to split it in half. So I have a full width and then a 1/2 width joined to it, and then a full width and a 1/2 width joined to it. And you're always having your 1/2 width to the outer side of your window, so your full width is in to the exact left and right of your window on your leading edges. So that's how I like to do it. Now, with that, we're going to go over how much material you need to cut. What we like to use here is a double turned 4-inch bottom hem. Now, if you're a beginner, I'll explain that to you. A double 4-inch bottom hem is you're taking your material and you're folding it the first time and making sure you have 4 inches, and then you're going to turn it again, and that gives you a double turned 4-inch hem. And that's what I like to put on the bottom of my drapery. Then for the top, which we're going to be putting buckram in, I also like to do the same thing. I like to, first of all, the buckram is 4 inches wide, and you'll see that in my next videos. So anyway, you're going to again put the buckram in, and it's going to be another 4 inches and 4 inches. So you have 8 inches. So you have a double 4-inch bottom hem, that's 8 inches, a double 4-inch top hem, That's another 8 inches. That's 16 inches. And then I like to add an additional 2 inches for what's called sewing loss, which means when you join your fabrics, sometimes you lose it, sometimes it doesn't quite come out even, especially the longer you go. And then I'm also adding on this, on the leading edge, this little banding right here. And we're going to be adding this right down to the leading edge. So when you're sewing that down, sometimes you have a little extra loss in it. So giving yourself an extra 2 inches is fine. And what happens after you join everything, we join everything from the bottom. So when you sew your half-width panel, start from the bottom. And then by the time you line it and everything, the last thing we do is we trim off all the extra at the top before we roll the buckram into it. So that's how that's made. So in my scenario, my length is 86.5 inches. So what am I cutting? 86.5 plus 8 inches for my bottom, plus 8 inches for my top, plus a 2-inch sewing allowance. My cut becomes 104.5 inches. So I'm making 3 cuts at 104.5 inches. I'm taking one of those cuts, I'm folding it in half, and I'm cutting it. So I've got, that's how I do it. You don't have to do it that way. But anyway, so you have a 1.5 width and 1.5 width. So you're cutting one of those in half to get it. Now the drapery lining is a little separate. We are also lining this too. We're, in our case, we're using a room darkening, a 100% room darkening fabric. This is not exactly what I'm showing you, but now the lining is a little different because we do not put a double 4-inch hem on the lining. We only do a double turn 1.5 hem. So again, it's going to be 1.5 inches, double turned, and that's what we're putting on our lining. Our lining is cut also a little differently because we are allowing for only 1.5 inches hem. But our whole scenario is if you cut your lining 2.5 inches over your finished length, that's all you need. And when I walk you through the steps, you'll see that it goes right up to the top of the drapery. So you just have to kind of trust me on that. You're gonna, if again, my length is 86.5, take 86.5, you add 2.5 inches to it. You come out, I'm cutting my lining only at 89 inches. So by the time I put 1.5 inches hem in it, double turned, and then when you line it, when you line your drapery, you don't put it down to the very bottom of your drapery. You bring it up 1.5 inches, and by the time you bring it all the way up there, it's going to be at the top of your drapery. So that's just how that goes. And again, I'm making 3 cuts. I'm folding one in half and cutting it, so it's going to be the same scenario. Anyhow. The next step, we're going to join our fabrics. We're going to be putting our bottom hems in. We're going to be lining it. Oh, and I forgot, we're also adding our trim on. Trim gets put on before the lining is put on. So we're going to walk you through the whole scenario of that. Then we're also going to make a valance that matches, and with the valance, we're also putting the trim on. The trim's going around the bottom of it. Anyhow, that's enough talking for me. Oh, and I apologize about the dim lighting. We have no power. We're on battery, and so we have limited lights here. Anyhow, that's about it, and let's get started. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I've joined my fabric, and one thing you want to know is the orientation of your bottom. And what I mean by that is, what we do is we put a little mark on the bottom so we know what is our bottom, especially when it's a solid fabric, because you're dealing with a half width. So you want a mirror image of your panels. If you're looking at your window here, you want to make sure that the half width is on the outer edge of your window to the left, and the other half width is in the outer edge of the right. So make sure you don't make that kind of a mistake that you're putting the bottom hem, you flip the material around and you have the bottom hem on the wrong end. So you just make sure you do that. And when we overlock, what we do is we overlock. This is an overlock stitch on our machine. When we join this together, it kind of surges off the end so it doesn't fray or what have you. If you don't have that, don't worry about it, just stitch it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a 4-inch hem. So what you want to do, we're just going to do this really quickly, is we're going to bring this up like so. That's our first turn. Like we said, we have a double turn here. So we're going to take our ruler, going to make sure we have 4 inches throughout the whole drapery panel. Once you have your 4 inches, if you're really a real beginner, you can even press your 4 inches in. We don't bother doing that. As a matter of fact, I can pretty much so eyeball what the 4 inches is going to be. Once you have your first 4 inches, you want to carefully turn this over. Like so, and you're going to measure, make sure you're keeping your 4 inches, your material's all the way inside. Take your ruler and make sure you have 4 inches. And then you're going to want a pin. Once you got this all pinned, go ahead and sew it. We use what's called a blind stitch machine, which I'll show you later. It kind of looks like we've hand sewn it. If you have that option available on your sewing machine, you know how to do it, I would recommend it. But that's just an option. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to finish pinning this, then I'm going to blind stitch it, and then we're going to go to the linings. This is a double 4-inch turned hem. Stitch this now, it's all blind stitched, and the blind stitch kind of gives you almost like a hand tack feeling to it. You really can't tell that it's there unless you're really looking. It leaves these little dots on the, let me just get a little closer picture here. So that's what that looks like. And then on the back side of it, that's what that hem looks like right there. And the type of machine, again, it's called a blind stitch machine, and it is this machine right here. This is a real old machine, but it works super well. So that's what your hem is going to look like if you're blind stitching it. It's probably one of the better ways to do it. If you have it, that would be, you know, that's great. Or if your sewing machine at home has that type of feature on there, I would recommend it. So now I have the lining on the table, and I apologize, my table's white and so is the lining, but this is my lining. Now again, we're going to go over the orientation. If you remember that the blue fabric that I just had on the table, the seam was on the opposite end. Okay, there's my seam right here, or my seam where the half width's been seamed onto it. And this is going to be a very important deal if you're dealing with a half width. This actually goes on the blue material that I just had where the seam was here, because I'm working on the back side of it, but this hem is going to line up with the hem on my blue drape, and so I'm going to be flipping it. So keeping orientation in mind when you're putting bottom hems in, you want to make sure that the half width hem is on the same side of your lining as it is on your face material, the blue that I had. So keep that in mind. This time we're putting a double turned 1.5 inch hem into the lining. So this, let me just show it like that. So then I'm just going to take my ruler, make sure I have my 1.5 inch on there. I'm going to stick some pins in it. I'm going to work it all the way down. Also, the other thing with this is my pin orientation too. My points of my pins are going this way, so when I'm going through my machine, it's easy enough to pull out the head of the pin. Versus if I were to put my pin in this direction, I'm left-handed, so this may be a little different, but it might help you. If I put my pin in this direction, then when I'm sewing it, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to take it out. So I like to put them in the direction of the way I am sewing at the machine. Just a little tip there. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to finish this up, put my 1.5 inch. I hope you enjoyed the content of my videos. And I'm hoping that you're going to like and subscribe to my channel. It would be muchly appreciated. Also, I put a lot of time and effort into putting this together, and I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind donating a small portion of money to keep this channel going. It's of course not necessary, but it's always appreciative. And also with that, if you have any questions regarding maybe some drapery stack back or swags, whatever your question is, I would be happy to help you out with that. And to do that, all you need to do is just search for Scott Weaver or Scott Weaver videos, and you can click on it, and there's the subscribe button, of course. And then you click onto my face here, and over here you'll see a donate to PayPal. You hit that, and it'll bring you to the link, and it is safe and secure. There it is right there. You can donate with either a credit card, any credit card or debit card, or by PayPal. Of course, this is not necessary, and I'm going to keep giving you the best videos that I possibly can with the limited resources I have. But anyhow, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.